William the Conqueror back in 1078. Now, over his lifetime, the tower has served many purposes, most infamously as a state prison, place of torture and execution. Traitors to the crown, they would be rowed through the once open archway on the river's wall that reads entry to the Traitors' Gates. They would then be imprisoned inside the bloody tower before eventually being taken up to the Tower Hill to have their heads chopped off via a rusty axe. Now, the Traitors' Gate today, that's now permanently bricked up, and that's to prevent the river from flooding the tower's moat when the tide rises. And of course, we're not allowed to chop people's heads off anymore, so we don't do that. The Tower of London is now a museum, and it's also the home of the crown jewels, closely guarded by the London beefeaters. And ahead of us we have Tower Bridge, designed by a man called Sir John Wolfe Barry, finished construction back in 1894. A twin suspension and a bascule bridge, and what that means is the two centre roadways we are shortly to pass underneath, which each weigh 1,100 tonnes each. They lift up like a double drawbridge to become fully upright in just under 90 seconds. But this is done to allow larger ships in and out of the upper pool of London. Now, you can still cross the bridge, folks, when it's lifted. Look to the very top here. There are two catwalks. They're open to the public. In recent years, they've put in some glass pavements in these catwalks as well. So if you go up there, you can watch the boats pass underneath you. You do have to be careful though, folks, when you look up through those glass pavements. We passed under the bridge the other afternoon. There was a Scottish wedding reception taking place up there. Now we pass through Tower Bridge, we leave the City of London, we now enter into the Docklands area of the River Thames. Before we travel any further downstream, just ahead of us and to our right there, we do have our next scheduled stop. This is Butler's Wharf Pier for the Tower. Now we're going to turn the boat around now to land you safely ashore. If we have any passengers with a Tower Bridge ticket of any kind, Tower Bridge Butler's Wharf, single, return or round trip, this is where you'll be leaving the boat. This is the end of your journey. If you have a River Pass ticket or a ticket to Greenwich, you stay on board the boat, continue with us down to Greenwich. So if you've got a Tower ticket of any kind, folks, this is the end of your journey. Tower Bridge, Butler's Wharf, Golden Tours, this is where you leave us. If you have a Greenwich ticket, you will stay on board the boat. Now we're going to turn around, folks, so you can get a lovely photograph of Tower Bridge and the City of London. I will have to recommend though, folks, once these are mostly luxury apartments on the middle and upper floors, with a variety of bars, restaurants and shops at ground level. Keep looking to the right, just past the last Butler's Wharf building. So you're going to see an opening in the river's wall. The footbridge goes over the top. The entrance to St Saviour's Docks, also known as Dockhead on Bermondsey. Now, if you were to enter into these docks here, travel up them, you'll find yourself in a place called Jacob's Island. Now, this is where lots of the filming for the old black and white film, the musical Oliver, was filmed. The original author, Charles Dickens, he was living in this part of South London, the area of Bermondsey. Whilst writing the novel, it's said he based many of the characters on the people he met in the area. Now, just ahead of us, and over to your left-hand side here, we will see a warehouse with Oliver's Wharf written across the side of it. Now, Oliver's Wharf is said to be one of the first of many of the old riverside warehouses that would later go on to be converted into a luxury apartment complex. For many years, the singer and actress Cher, she lived in the penthouse apartment of the building. Now, she was getting quite fed up though with us pleasure boats constantly telling everyone where she lived, and we'd receive lots of cease and desist letters, all of which we ignored. Eventually she got so fed up that she just decided to pack up and move to a new apartment in Chelsea Harbour, apartment block A, apartment number 27. But just before Oliver's Wharf here, you're going to see, it looks like a slope leading down into the river here on our left, and that was the old lock entrance to the London docks. And this is where large vessels like the Cutty Sark would have unloaded their cargoes into London. But during our Second World War, London was bombed heavily, and the London docks were also targeted. The lock entrance was destroyed and it was never repaired. You can see the old dockmaster's house next to it. That's the brown brick building with the security cameras around the outside. This is now the home of a British actress called Dame Helen Mirren. Now, next to her home and in between Oliver's Wharf here, an old Thameside pub called the Town of Ramsgate. This was used as an admiralty court back in the 1700s by a man called Hanging Judge Jeffreys. Convicted pirates and smugglers would be sent to the pub to receive their last tot of rum before being dragged down the stairs here along this foreshore on the low tide to the brown brick building with a capital letter E in the apex. This is Execution Dock. It was here at Execution Dock where Hanging Judge Jeffreys would sentence his prisoners to their deaths. This would be done by first hanging them by the neck and then chaining them to the river's wall to wait for 3 high tides to pass over their heads before pronouncing them well and truly dead. This form of execution was known as the Grace of Wapping. Whilst the executions were taking place, Judge Jeffreys, he would be rowed across the river to that tavern here on the right called the Angel, where he would sit on the balcony of the tavern, drinking his pint of ale and watching his executions taking place on the opposite shore. He said that he found this highly amusing. Now we're going to cross back over to the left here. We see a yellow and blue pier with the police boats tied up alongside. Wapping Police Pier. Headquarters for the River Thames Division of the Metropolitan Police. One of the oldest uniformed police forces in the world. Set up in 1789 by 3 Scotsmen, Patrick Calhoun, John Harriot and Robert Peel, under the East India Shipping Company. And this was to combat all the rampant amounts of piracy which was taking place here on the river. Now they were so successful that Robert Peel, he would eventually break off, go on to form the land-based Metropolitan Police, and that's where we get the nickname Bobbies for the police in England, because they were Robert Peel's men. Just on the right here, the church spire. This is St Mary's Church of Rotherhithe. Buried in the graveyard of the church, you'll find the body of the ship captain, Sir Christopher Jones. He was the master of the pilgrim ship Mayflower, which was built in this section of the river here before it would set sail along to Plymouth to pick up some pilgrim fathers before crossing the North Atlantic to the New World of America. Returned and broken down on the foreshore, the timbers used to make furniture inside the church. Also here on your right we can see a small warehouse with a blue painted door. The open space with the trees next to the warehouse, this is called Pilgrim's Park. It's devoted to the crew of the Mayflower. As we come level with the park, you'll see just by the old brick wall and lamppost here, a cast iron statue of one of the Pilgrim Fathers and their child who journeyed on board the Mayflower to America. In the child's hand there's a book, and it details each of the names of the crew members who served on board the ship. Crossing over to your left now, just ahead of us here, we will see a white house on the riverfront next to a willow tree. This is the Prospect of Whitby, the oldest pub on the banks of the Thames, established back in the year 1520, and that's back during the reign of King Henry VIII. But back then though folks, this pub wasn't called the Prospect, it was known as the Devil's Punch Bowl, and that was due to all the unsavoury characters who frequented the pub. Mostly river pirates, smugglers, murderers, and the old East End gangsters of London. I've also heard, folks, Boris Johnson's been in there once or twice. Now the pub, It changed its name to the Prospect in honour of the Whitby coaling fleet from Yorkshire. They would anchor outside the pub to service the warehouse next door. A lot of the crew members were regulars in there, and during one of their voyages back home they would encounter a very violent storm. The ship was sunk and the entire crew were lost, so the pub would end up changing its name in honour of the fallen crew. Still staying to this left-hand side, just ahead of us here, behind the cranes, we see a very bizarrely shapen red brick building. That's an apartment complex today. I've been told it was designed to purposely provide each of the apartments inside with a riverside facing view. Therefore, you're allowed to charge more money for each of the apartments inside. I had a look at one of the properties listed in there the other afternoon. It was a one-bedroom studio apartment, if you're American, and they were asking for £500,000. That's £500,000 for a studio flat in this building. I'd probably get a 4-bedroom house for that money around where I'm from. But originally, the building was built on top of the site of a very famous old warehouse, which is known as Free Trade Wharf. Now, Free Trade Wharf, folks, earns its name dating back to the Great Plague of London of 1665. Back during this plague year, no one would trade with London out of the fear of catching the plague and bringing it back home with them. And this was everyone except for the Dutch. And over here is where they used to berth their ships. Due to their bravery, our king at the time, a man called King Charles II, he would make concessions stating that every time a Dutch merchant ship were to enter a port in London, they would do so for free. They waived all tolls and taxes. This concession is still alive today. Now just here on the right, we've got a building with a lot of scaffold around the front of it. This is Globe Wharf. It was once the largest rice mill in the south of England. Inevitably now though, more luxury riverside facing apartments. Now, like the Oxo Tower, this building also has a grade 2 listing. That's why the red crane still remains on the face of the building today. But if you were to travel up the river many years ago, all you'd have seen around, you wouldn't have seen many apartment, or you wouldn't have seen any apartment buildings. All you'd have seen would have been countless riverside warehouses resembling Globe Wharf. And these warehouses, they used to build them right against the river's wall, because when the tide was high enough, barges and cargo vessels, they could just tie up right alongside, and it would make loading and unloading the cargo a lot easier. This is also where you get the word wharf from. Wharf's an acronym. It stands for Warehouse at Riverfront. Now coming up on our left here, we've got the lock entrance to Limehouse Marina, where if you have a small enough boat, like a canal barge, you can enter into the marina, Limehouse Basin. You can travel up to North London, a place called Camden Lock, Little Venice. Join up with the Reals of England. You can travel as far as Birmingham, Liverpool or Manchester. If you'd like to do this though, it's going to take you a while. It might take you a week or two. You'll be travelling at about 4 miles an hour, and you'd have to manually operate close to 200 lock entrances. The old Dockmaster's house by the entrance, that's now a gastro pub called The Narrow, and this is owned by Gordon Ramsay, celebrity chef.